Hey, today in a Cup of Joe, let's talk about the top 5 hottest topics of 2021. Hey, are you looking for an easy New Year's resolution? Just make it that you're going to subscribe to a Cup of Joe and share one video this year. 2021 was a trip. Of course, it was another pandemic lockdown, and of course, some of these top 5 hot topic items are going to relate to the pandemic because everything relates to the pandemic these days. But here we are going into the new year with another lockdown. Maybe this is the fourth wave, but we'll see what happens. Let's go over the top 5 topics, and I've got a couple of honorable mentions thrown in there. Now, of course, you're not going to get through a top 5 topic of 2021 without mentioning the pandemic, but also I'm going to have to mention NFT, crypto, and Metaverse. So when you hear those terms, if you've got passionate ideas, you may very well disagree with what I'm going to say here. So listen in and feel free to drop a comment down the end if you don't like what I got to say or you want to add to the conversation. Number 5. This is the movement for everyone to continue to work from home. Of course, this started last year and everyone had to start working through remote sessions using Teradici or HP Remote and having machines at home and machines at work. But this has now become permanent for a lot of studios. You'll notice over the last few months, Cinesite and Zoic have both announced that they're going to have a permanent work at home capacity to their team. And if anybody wants to get hired that wants to stay work from home, you might want to look at those studios. I am hearing that some studios are telling their employees that they are going to need to be on site for certain projects. These are certain high security projects where the client is insisting that the people be on site. But that being said, I could imagine this Omicron latest variant has even stopped or postponed some of those discussions. And unfortunately, not to be a cynic, but I fear that there's the chance the studios are using that as a bit of a push to get some folks on site. I do know that there are some folks, often in the kind of the old guard of the studio, that just want to go back to the way it was and everyone was back on site. But like I've pointed out on some other videos, it's time to address the new reality. There was a time when working in 2 different studios or working in 2 different cities was considered too crazy and too much of a burden on production, but it quickly adjusted to that. And now there's a great many supervisors that are always going to be remotely supporting part of their team. So whether that remote employee is sitting remotely in the office 1,000 miles away or remotely in their home 1,000 miles away, it shouldn't really impact the workflow. So as such, there are many studios that are deciding to stick with the stay-at-home practice, and they're going to adjust to that going forward. And to be honest, there are some that simply could never go back to having the whole studio in place because they've expanded their workforce well beyond what their brick-and-mortar footprint was before the pandemic. So now they would never be able to bring the full workforce back into the studio, even if they wanted to. So going forward, of course, it's important that where people are asked their opinions, if they have thoughts that they want to work from home, they should make sure that their employers know. They should make sure their prospective employers know. And it's a seller's market for the artists. And they should know that they can go ahead and push for work from home as a requirement. And they should be able to find a job that matches that requirement. We'll see how long that lasts. So number 4 is Autodesk changing the name of Shotgun to ShotGrid. This was a big announcement. This coincided with some other changes that are happening to Shotgun, or what we now call ShotGrid. Some of those changes are the single sign-on scenario. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but how it's licensed is changed drastically. And any IT manager who is hosting Autodesk, or especially ShotGrid licenses, knows exactly what I'm talking about. But it has to do with basically each artist needs to have a login and an account with that system. And that has really changed the way IT administrators and the studios at large are dealing with purchasing and sizing up how many licenses they need. But also, there's a fundamental change to that name from Shotgun to ShotGrid. It doesn't surprise me. It was always kind of funny that it was named such a heavy name like Shotgun. Back in the days of the orphanage, like I mentioned before in other videos, Shotgun was first started at a couple of studios, including the orphanage, where there was all kinds of tools names like Revolver and other gun-heavy names. Heck, at the same time, Digital Domain was making Nuke. I mean, back in the day, these boys with big guns were making some names that maybe we don't need now. A shotgun as a logo and as a product name can actually have some interesting effects. I had some folks, some very gentle programmers that I had brought into a studio to do some network work. And when they first logged in remotely to the site, the first thing they were greeted with was some pop-up for Shotgun. Now, these are just some network guys who are not in our media and entertainment world, so they've never heard of Shotgun before, but the very first thing they were greeted with was a pop-up screen asking them to log into Shotgun. And they were taken a little back. I mean, to someone who's maybe not used to guns, all of a sudden a shotgun was staring at them in the face. So with the world changing as it is, I was nice to see that Autodesk and the folks decided to move away from such a harsh name like Shotgun, and now it's going to be called Shot Grid. Now, of course, forevermore in documentation, and people are going to be calling it Shotgun for years to come. But it was a realistic move on their part to move to a new title name called Shot Grid. All right, let's talk about number 3. Buyouts and mergers that happened this year. We saw Netflix buy Scanline. We saw Unity, the software company, actually buy Weta, the visual effects company. I mean, what's happening here? We're seeing all kinds of vertical and horizontal connections in a whole kind of new way. So when you look at Netflix, I guess this helps them with the supply chain of finding vendors that can do the work. The reality is there's more work than there are vendors right now. So maybe some of these large studios will be buying more visual effects and animation companies to make sure that they have got a bench of employees and teams to do the work that they need to get done. They don't have to compete directly with all the other studios. Unity buying Weta took me by surprise. Admittedly, I'm not much in the Unity world, and I don't really know much about Weta's tools other than they have a series of tools that they've been working on, some of them which have been released, and now there's going to be a bevy of internal tools that will be able to be released through the Unity team. And I'm sure with all of the 3D and Metaverse and Omniverse kind of stuff happening out there, the idea of a software company and a visual effects company sort of working in the same workflow is going to be a theme, I think, here as we talk about some of the other items coming up. Then, of course, there's Framestore buying Company 3. I can't really talk much about that because of NDAs, but needless to say, it's publicly known, and they're not the only ones. There are multiple studios over this last year and starting the year before that have been basically buying pieces and buying other studios. We saw Crafty Apes buy CVD. It's just been happening all over the place. So there's this consolidation as more and more demand gets made on this market. It's going to start to grow and become mature. A lot of these small companies are now going to grow to be medium companies. They'll probably be bought in the next year or two as well. So expect to see more mergers and buyouts into 2022. Okay, for number 2, I had to look at the AMD revolution as it continued to progress throughout this whole year. That, of course, talks about our render. You've seen me post videos about our very, very dense render offerings that we have that have been based around AMD because it's just been the biggest bang for the buck to get the most amount of cores into a rack. We also have the NVIDIA story that ties into AMD, where AMD and NVIDIA have created some great products like with Lenovo and other manufacturers that are starting to fuel the visual effects and animation market, especially as it pertains to Unreal. We have Unreal and Unity and the whole idea of 3D real-time rendering happening now, and it's happening with AMD mainly because they have the cores and the speed matched up, so folks are getting the biggest bang for their buck if they're building something in 2021. It's likely going to have an AMD proc in it. We're going to see that continue into 2022. So this whole AMD revolution that I've talked about in detail on my channel, I'll throw a few links down in the description, and I'm probably going to post some image somewhere here or there talking about that. So feel free to peruse my channel. There's a whole playlist just on AMD alone, and really, they have been changing the game throughout all of 2021, and that really started well before 2021, and it's going to continue well into 2022 when they start offering chips that have 96 cores, and then eventually in the following year, 128 cores. With all of this stuff coming out from AMD, I know Intel is going to be working really hard and is already working hard to basically meet the new bar that they've set, so I'm really looking forward in the next year or two to see how much these folks go to head and simply make each other's products better through competition. Before I get into number 1, which is going to be a lengthy one, we're going to talk about a couple honorable mentions that I just wanted to bring up here. One was the outages we saw with AWS and some of the other cloud providers, where no one could sign in or couldn't get to certain regions. Let's face it, these hypercloud offerings offer the sort of scalability, redundancy, and cross-region geolocation better than anyone. And the reality is you can have many instances of things going around the country, but your cloud provider is still a single point of failure. And that's what was pointed out by the most recent AWS failures. Hey, I don't fault them. They came back within hours. I'm amazed that AWS doesn't have more outages given the sheer size and complexity that it is. It's an amazing, amazing product. So I'm not slamming the product here, but it did bring to the reality that when you rely on one single source of everything, that one single source is going to be a single point of failure, whether that's at the vendor level or that's at the cross-regional level or an individual server sitting in your server room. The cloud is still often a single point of failure, even when you've spread yourself real far and wide across a particular cloud offering. And the other honorable mention is the CDW Studio Cloud turned 10 years old this year. Towards the end of this year, we hit the 10-year mark on the CDW Studio Cloud here in Vancouver. The story behind the Studio Cloud is 10 years ago, Disney and other large studios didn't want to send the work to Vancouver unless there was a render farm up there of a significant size that could handle the work. They'd say 1,000 machines was often the number thrown about. So these three studios got together, formed a collective, went out there and found a company, and that was us, to build a render farm that they could all procure. So they would share certain portions. When one company didn't need it, the other company could use it. It created sort of an exchange or a co-op system that we were in charge of. It's a very Canadian solution, of course. And as a result, it grew and grew and grew to where now we have nearly 200,000 cores across North America. We've got dozens of studios using us for co-location and for our render as well as storage. It's grown over the last 10 years and really helped enable the entire Vancouver visual effects and animation community to grow in ways that they simply couldn't have if this farm wasn't sitting here in Montreal and now Los Angeles, just waiting for them to get the work and plug in and start rendering. So we've made it real easy, and we're going to continue to make it easy into the coming decade. But we're really excited about the 10-year anniversary, and we've decided to increase our client bandwidth to now 100 gigabits. So now any of our clients who want to have 100 gigabit connectivity to us, we can just turn that on, no problem at all. So I'm real proud of our team hitting the 10-year mark. Congratulations, Studio Cloud. Number one, the Metaverse, Omniverse, and what that means to our community and the whole of society, really. So I'm going to get a little deep here. Now, there's three basic terms to talk about here: Metaverse, Omniverse, and then you'll hear the term multiverse, which has been around for a long time. The multiverse is really based on some ideas around physics and all that, of there being many, many timelines and many, many universes out there all happening simultaneously. That term has been brought into things like the Metaverse and Omniverse, and so that's more of a scientific or a philosophical term that we're not going to get into. What I am going to talk about is the Metaverse and Omniverse specifically. Now, how to determine the difference between these. The Metaverse, if you haven't been following the news, is basically in development, and it's part of this Web3 sort of mentality, this new generation of the internet, a new generation in which we're going to interconnect. And it's very much built around the 3D virtual reality model. So whether you're driving around a 3D world on your computer, or whether you actually have a headset on and you're actually interacting in a 3D world, the idea is creating 3D spaces. Now, these 3D spaces have to be created, and Omniverse creates these 3D spaces, basically. It was originally designed and has been designed for very much business to business use. So this is a tool that's going to be used by folks creating metaverses. Now, if they're creating a metaverse so that they can train AI driving models in a virtual like one-to-one relationship with Earth type model. In the example of creating a second Earth or a second universe to train AI models in, whether that's driving models or robot models, NVIDIA has been pioneering this work so that rather than, say, have a robot car testing in a robot track, trying to test all the AI models and possibilities in the real world, you can create hundreds or thousands of these in a simulation environment in a 3D universe that's just digital. So you can now train this model with countless parallel metaverses happening all at once, rather than just taking your 5 test cars and putting them into a parking lot and having them start driving around. So you can see how this can scale up from 5 cars to 5 million cars on 5 million parking lots, all testing simultaneously. So it's about creating this 3D modeled world that, in the case of NVIDIA, awfully is closely modeling what the real world is. This is also, of course, in visual effects and animation. So there's a time now where they're going to be using Omniverse to create 3D worlds that are going to be used for backgrounds on LED sets, are going to be actually used for graphics going straight into the movies. And so Omniverse, which is still in its infancy and still finding its legs in the industry, is going to be a tool to build these worlds. It's using USD, Universal Scene Description, which is an open source standard created by Pixar. Now, I'm going to get back to that, but this kind of links into the idea that the entire metaverse world, whether it's going to be gaming or VR goggles or visual effects or animation, it's amazing how much of it's going to link back to USD and back to the visual effects and animation industry as being a linchpin or a starting point for all the technology that will be getting used by the consumer in the coming years. With Omniverse being a tool for folks to build metaverses, then there's the metaverse itself. And the metaverse is where the money will be made. Now we can go back to that example I just gave where maybe you're creating metaverses to train AI models and then you're farming them out to Tesla and other companies to run their AI driving through these AI models rather than having to do it in the real world on the street. So that's one way to create money off the metaverse. But what Facebook and everyone else is talking about is more of a consumer-driven metaverse. These are creating multiple digital worlds, 3D worlds, similar to what you might have seen with your kids doing Roblox and such, but bigger than that. It's not just Roblox. It's going to be an entire copy of a digital world on a server or on a series of servers, or maybe distributed across many people's servers in a sort of blockchain kind of way. It's still being defined how it's going to be served up, how it's going to be carved up, how it's going to be charged for and paid for. But as we're already seeing, there's this NFT crypto tie-in to the metaverse that I'm going to talk about here a little bit, but I also would like to stress I'm not an expert on this, and I'm still getting my feet wet in the whole idea of NFTs, crypto, and the metaverse. But I'm going to dive into it here just a little more. We've all seen how everyone's locked down in this pandemic lockdown. Towards the end of this year, everyone got locked down again. This is causing people to delve into their digital worlds more. Now, we've already seen it grow with streaming and all the various services. It's why we see such growth in the visual effects and animation industry. But we're also going to see it grow into this metaverse. Let's assume, unfortunately, that this isn't the last time we're going to be locked down in our homes. Let's assume that there may be more pandemics or other issues that require us to stay in our homes or to stay localized or not to be going into theaters and concerts as much. There's likely going to be some changes coming up, and that's going to fuel this idea of people trying to escape to a metaverse. We already have people escaping to the metaverse of their phones. There was a comment that Elon Musk made on the Joe Rogan show about how we're already attached to a cybernetic existence with our phones.
It's kind of like, how much smarter are you with a phone or computer than without? You're vastly smarter, actually. You can answer any question. If you connect to the internet, you can answer any question pretty much instantly, any calculation. Your phone's memory is essentially perfect. You can remember flawlessly. Your phone can remember videos, pictures, everything perfectly. Your phone is already an extension of you. You're already a cyborg. Most people don't realize they are already a cyborg.
Like he was saying, we're already willing to give an enormous amount of our time to the screens that are being provided to us from Facebook, Instagram, various games on social games. We're already doing this. We're giving away countless hours of our lives to this product. We're ripe for something far more immersive than just staring at a little 4-inch screen in our palms. There is a market for this. With NFTs and crypto, which again, I'm not going to get into great detail here, but I do have some concerns with the idea that NFTs are basically creating and manufacturing scarcity where there may not be nearly the scarcity that's being purported. Everything that exists lives on servers and is in data centers. It's costly. If people are hosting things on blockchains, then all of those servers require power and they need to be purchased and maintained. So I get it. I get that there is, in a digital world, value to the space of a server, and that can somehow, in a sense, be carved up into something that can be charged out, something we do with our render servers today. But this is kind of creating markets where they don't exist, creating a world and then selling it at a premium and creating only as much as you need to create to make sure the scarcity works to your advantage. We're manufacturing scarcity where there isn't always scarcity. And that's a great way to make money, but it's not a sustainable model for building value. Now, I still have to work out these thoughts, and so if you disagree with me, then please jump down in the comments and tell me, set me straight. If you think that there's really good resources to learn about NFTs or crypto, which is really behind a lot of NFT technology and is getting tied into how you will be interacting with the metaverse on a commercial basis, please feel free to comment below, set me straight. And there's, of course, the obvious social implications of what happens if we live in a world where everyone's just sitting around with headsets on, staring at their screens. We already seen a social backlash or a certain taboo of everyone staring at their screens at particular moments or trying to record everything through their screens at particular moments. How is this going to be moving forward? We already seen, like in the previous quote from Elon Musk, how much we're willing to devote our time to our devices. What happens when those devices completely envelop our vision and sound and we're getting cut off from the real world? Like many people have said, what happens when you spend all day in your metaverse awesome apartment with your awesome things you have, with your awesome looking avatar, and then you end up taking that off in your crappy apartment with your not necessarily best looking face or body like this, and what's that going to do to psyche? We already know what the Instagram effect is on teens and other folks, and the effects on depression. What's going to happen when they're actual tangible worlds that you can immerse yourself in, and they're controlled by, big corporations, or they're controlled by a decentralized sort of social credit system, if you will? It reeks of concerns. If you look back at the visual effects and animation industry, I never expected it to have an effect on society the way it does. A lot of the folks I know from the visual effects and animation industry during the .com years moved to Google, and at the time AOL and Netscape and these companies, these .com boom companies, and I started realizing, there's this link between what we're doing in visual effects and animation and what they're doing. But it was mostly in skill sets of coding and things like that. But now we're moving into a new generation where I have folks, friends of mine, that are now moving to AWS, or more importantly, Facebook, and they're working on things that involve putting on VR headsets and making digital people. When we've decided to create digital people and put it in the hands of the folks like, Facebook and other corporations to figure out how to make money, and using things like USD and using things like NVIDIA and AMD and tools that maybe some of us in the industry have helped create or fuel or get put to market, there's an ethical implication here, is what I'm trying to say. I'm all in. I'm going to be buying a headset this year. I'm going to look to see how I can get further into NFTs and crypto this year. I've got some ideas, but I'll save those for the launch. I have concerns over crypto transactions as well. Decentralized is great until it all crashes and burns, and we'll see if it ever crashes and burns. Of course, there's always the theory, no, it will never crash and burn. I always love that theory. We'll see. Needless to say, you may have thoughts about this. Please feel free to comment below, set me straight, tell me I'm full of crap, tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. You're probably right. But I have deep, deep concerns over the social implications of the metaverse as it pertains to a commercial model that will be owned by the next Facebooks and Instagrams of the world, and how we will be productized in a new way. We'll see where this goes. I listen to some economists, and they always say, we're not planning on how things should be, we're planning on how things will be. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is think about with NFTs and the metaverses, not what should be, but what will be. And the reality is we should be thinking about what should be. So hopefully over the next few years, we have some moments to reflect on the metaverse as it builds out and see that it's built with a little bit of egalitarianism, a little bit of community and democracy in mind, rather than how can I maximize my money and go and have 1,000% returns on my crypto investment because that's what's best for the world. It's great for your pockets, but it's not necessarily the best thing for the world. So I'll stop there. It's something I've always had a problem with, being in the world of technology. We're in the business of often putting people out of work by digitizing what was done by humans before. And there's ethical implications to everything we're doing. So I guess I'm just asking you, as you proceed forward into this world as a consumer or as a producer of metaverse and other visual effects and animation related technology, take a moment at times to think about the ethical issues involved and whether you should be doing what you're doing, or maybe change how you were doing something so that it better fits an ethical or socially appropriate model. Just take a moment here or there to think about those social and ethical implications, please. So let's dive into the metaverse. Feel free again to include any links in the comments below. Where do you think I should be going to learn more about the metaverse? Maybe there's a world you really like. Maybe you just want to plug your little land in Decentraland, and you want to plug your NFT. Feel free to put it in the comments. I don't care. I'm calling it a free-for-all right now. Anything you want to talk about involving crypto, metaverse, or NFTs, or any of the subjects I've talked about here, go ahead and throw it in the comments. I like people to be rough. I like it when people disagree. Get in there and say something, all right? Anyway, it's 2021. It's coming to a close here. Let's look forward to 2022. I think we're going to be doing things that no one even dreamed of by the end of 2022. And I can't wait to do this top 5 list next year on A Cup of Joe. Thanks, everyone.